Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Colleges panic as Trump promises to make them pay restitution to victims of DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have had a pretty good run these last few years, but now they're getting wiped out. From Yahoo News, Trump threatens to use school funding to pay restitutions to victims of DEI. And these are people that were discriminated against because of their skin color or whatever agenda the school was trying to push. And from PBS News, Trump promised to end wokeness in education. He's promised to use federal funds as leverage. Controlling the federal government means you get to control how a lot of money is sent to a lot of different places. Colleges and universities and other schools receive tons of money through the federal government. He will use that, as other administrations have done, to get rid of the nonsense that's been pushed on students as young as kindergarten through 12th grade. In addition to colleges and universities. And from the Hill, schools and colleges brace for a much more threatening political environment. Yes, because there's finally going to be a response to the political ideology of pushing wokeness and DEI in colleges and schools. And they're not going to like it. Trump's big plans for reshaping education in the United States include fining schools for implementing and engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and using seized funds as restitution for victims of DEI policies. I love this idea. If these schools are going to discriminate against any of their students, especially if they're admitting to it, they're doing it openly, fine them, take their money, and give it to the people who've been victimized. On the campaign trail, the now president-elect appealed to people who see progressive changes in education as, quote, indoctrination of children by promising to end all diversity programs that are meant to promote and maintain fair treatment among people who historically are underrepresented or discriminated against. We already settled this issue. You're not allowed to make yourself the arbiter, the decision maker, to try to settle all disputes from a couple of hundred years ago. I understand. There's shared pain everywhere in society. But it's not up to independent organizations to make decisions about whether or not they're going to force reparations in one form or another to try to make unequal opportunity for people to right past wrongs. If anyone, that's for the federal government to decide. And that's why Trump is going to pay reparations to people who are victims of being discriminated against. And discriminated against not hundreds of years ago, like as of now, like recently discriminated against. Watch all of these programs get wiped out. And Trump said this, quote, schools that persist in explicit unlawful discrimination under the guise of equity will not only have their endowment taxed, but through budget reconciliation, I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment, according to Trump. Trump's promise appeals directly to critics of DEI programs that claim they're discriminatory towards other groups of people, particularly white people and Asian people and anyone else that they don't sponsor and favor. There are issues with special funding and special opportunities for LGBT groups or that group or this group, and there's nothing wrong with anyone identifying any way they want to identify. They can even choose what skin color they want to be represented as or their gender. They can have as many genders as they want. Stop taking federal funds and discriminating against people. That's the simple policy. In a video, Trump added that some seized school funds would then be used as restitution for victims of these illegal and unjust policies. It's part of Trump's larger goal to dismantle federal anti-discrimination policies meant to protect students of all genders, sexes, races, sexual orientations, ethnicities, religions, and disabilities, and from people who come from multiple different planets, or perhaps were time travelers. You know, you get the idea. Something Trump and others have deemed a form of indoctrination. And some of the other people that said these kind of unfair treatments are actually illegal and unfair include a few people, I don't know, on the Supreme Court. Like, this has already been covered in the lawsuit against Harvard and UNC. You are not allowed to discriminate against people in applications or in any of these colleges and university settings. And now it's time to drop the hammer on these guys. Supporters of these illegal DEI programs have argued that they fulfill their intended purpose and do not cause the harm that opponents claim. In a post on Twitter, the civil rights organization, the NAACP, said DEI programs are key to ensuring equal opportunity for all students. Here's what they said, quote, "We must defend diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure every child succeeds. The fight for justice starts in the classroom, and we won't allow rhetoric to roll back progress." Okay, of course, though, you can't ensure that anyone succeeds, regardless of what resources you put into that individual. Some people don't have the right support from their families. Some people have other emotional problems or physical problems or other limitations. It would be great for everyone to live up to whatever potential they could possibly have. That's really not the federal government. That's really your family unit. It's your community. It's how much work you do. And to some degree, it's also luck. And as you get older, you start to see a lot of it has to do with the choices that you make. So be careful what you decide, because decisions you make today have a lot to do with your future tomorrow. I know it sounds like a fortune cookie, but it's true. In recent years, conservative parents have taken a stand against revisionist curriculum and inclusive policies. It's led to the parental rights movement, in which parents demand to have more authority over their children's curriculum and lesson plans. The issue isn't even having authority over children's curriculum and lesson plans, which, yes, you should have input on what ideas are being presented to your children in public schools. But that parents are being excluded from even knowing what's being told to their children so they can have a conversation about it with their children. Any good parent is going to be skeptical when they hear from a school or from a teacher, "No, we're not going to tell you what we're teaching your child." It's one thing to protect privacy from other students. Your child is your child. You don't have the right to know everything about every other child in a classroom. That should be kept private. This can't be kept private just because you think you might get blowback or you want to have a secret relationship with their child that the parent isn't involved in. Completely inappropriate. You're a parent of a child. You're expected to be protecting that child, raise that child right, and you can't do that if you don't know what influences are being put upon your child. Yet, despite the Department of Education playing a limited role in public school education throughout the country, Trump and others have capitalized on the movement to promise they will stop the federal government from intervening in children's education. Why should the federal government, what do they have, a different alphabet that we don't know about? Did they discover a number between 1 and 10 that we've been missing? What is it, 7.5? How about colors? Is there a shade of purple that we don't know about, that we spent $40 billion at the federal government, and now the federal government must secretly convey that to schools, and teachers must secretly convey that to your child, and you can't even know that they're doing that? I mean, look, of course the federal government does not need to be involved in these sorts of things. They can't be creating standards and local standards. The 50 states are very different places. Some are similar to others. But local school taxes and local government and community-involved school boards are the ones that figure out what's appropriate for your community, not whatever their agenda is in the federal government that they're not only wasting a lot of money on, but they seem to be cooking up a lot of progressive and dangerous ideas. And if they weren't dangerous, they would just tell parents what they actually are. Trump has teased he plans to get rid of the Department of Education, but it's unlikely that will occur, as he would need congressional approval. Though some Republicans support the idea, it would require a lot of convincing. And it may also be with the Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy restructuring of the federal government that they find a way to reassign some people in the Department of Education or reduce the size of it. There's law that says what they can and can't do. There's going to be fights all over the place about it. But just having a spotlight on it is going to make these guys who are pushing agendas out of the federal government a lot more reluctant to be pushing those things. Everything is going to get rolled back. And if Trump is successful, eliminated where possible. Miguel Cardona, the current Secretary of the Department of Education, wrote on Twitter, quote, "If you support eliminating the Department of Education, you do not support our students, period." They're not your students, Miguel. They are the students of the parents. At most, they're also the students in a small way of the local community and the local school government environment, not the federal government. They do not belong to you. The main role of the federal government is to provide funding primarily for K through 12 schools and oversee the federal student loan program according to the Department of Education. The government also enforces civil rights laws. And from the Hill, schools and colleges brace for a much more threatening political environment. Right, because the political environment that you're going into is one that is going to hold you accountable. Educators and university leaders are on the edge of their seats as President-elect Trump makes his return to office with an aggressive posture towards K through 12 and higher education. Trump has threatened multiple times to take away funding from schools if they do not align with his views on subjects such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and transgender rights. They're not going to be able to push this stuff anymore. All of their recent brilliant ideas over the last few years are going to get destroyed. That threat has left institutions holding their breath as they try to prepare with how to deal with the hostility they could face for the next 4 years. The federal government gives billions of dollars to colleges and universities every year, from grants to research funding to direct financial aid. K through 12 institutions receive a majority of their funding from state and local governments, while 7.6% came from the federal government in the 2019 to 2020 school year. Congress controls the power of the purse, that's the spending that the federal government actually does, and next year's GOP majority House and Senate could be amenable to Trump's goals. Quote, the first Trump administration failed in its repeated attempts to cut student aid and academic research, largely because they were disorganized and poorly educated in the workings of the federal government, but also because of the resistance from Congress. Now Trump and his allies are exploring various ways to withhold federal funding for individual colleges and universities that would be punitive. That could come from a much expanded concept of presidential authority and bills passed by Congress, like the Stop Woke Act already passed by the House, according to a consultant. At a campaign rally this cycle, Trump went after multiple elite universities he accused of stifling free speech on campus, saying he would, quote, take away their endowments, and which is money that was given to them by donors. Trump went on to say they will pay billions and billions of dollars for the terror they have unleashed into our once great country. Trump also said he would tax the endowments of schools that spend money on racial equity, and a portion of the seized funds will then be used as restitution for victims of these illegal and unjust policies. Policies that hurt our country so badly. He said K-12s that teach critical race theory, gender ideology, or other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children would also see a cut in federal funding. With a GOP trifecta in Washington, that's control of the White House, control of Congress, and control of the Senate, quote, there will be a much more accommodating Congress, at least until the midterms. Democrats can muster filibusters in the Senate, but fights over the budget and bills and procedures meant to accommodate Trump, along with the assumption of unprecedented executive authority, provide a much more threatening political environment for America's colleges and universities. And of course, there are ways of getting around Congress when restricting federal money. Trump's Department of Education is likely to change the definition of Title IX as it stands under Biden and remove language regarding discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The Biden rules on Title IX are absolutely ridiculous. They will be removed and they will be returned to what Trump had when Trump was president the first time. If the department creates rules against allowing transgender students in certain locker rooms, or sports teams and schools refuse to comply, one of the punishments for violating the rule could be a restriction in federal funds. If there's one common theme with all of these colleges and universities is they will do nothing that they think might threaten their funding. If it definitely threatens their funding, they won't do it. I've done about 100 of these videos in this related subject area, and I can tell you this. As much as these colleges and universities have political ideas and they want to push their agenda and their ideological religion, they won't do it if they think it could affect 50 cents worth of their funding. They love their funding above everything else. But I think you'll see an effort to define sex in Title IX as binary and biological, said Bob Edel, co-founder and president of the Defense of Freedom Institute, adding there could be efforts by the Trump administration to investigate those school districts and colleges and universities that go against the mandate. And there are specific threats to research funding under the second Trump White House as well. Quote, although it's speculative, the unitary executive theory, it is not speculative. The unitary executive theory is the president was elected as the executive branch. That's what it is. There is no fourth branch of federal government authority. There are three branches of government, not three branches of government and this other extra branch that gets to do whatever it wants if they call themselves career servants. This is the battle to get control back of the federal government, which has incredible power over people's everyday lives. We have no idea even quite how much, and we have no idea exactly where all that money goes. With Trump as the unitary executive, it creates a path for withholding or impounding federal funds for research in areas thought by the Trump administration to be antithetical to their political agenda, like climate change. That would likely be a nationwide restriction that, along with threats to drastically reduce funding for infrastructure costs of doing federal research, would create a huge hole in the financial model for research universities. The fluid situation leaves schools in a position of trying to figure out how to prepare without fully knowing what comes next. Quote, institutional leaders are holding their breath, but are also doubling down on seeking protections for DACA students, international students, and those most impacted by the removal of DEI offices and programs designed to ensure that campuses are the place of welcome and belonging for all students, from first-generation students, LGBT students, and students of color to veterans and students with disabilities, according to the consultant. All the colleges and universities would actually need to do is to follow the law. It's very clear what the laws are. You can't discriminate against people, even if you think you have a really great reason for it or you think it would be fun. You just legally can't do that. And if you do that, trying to say that the federal government doesn't have the authority to stop giving you money when you do things like that isn't going to work. People voted for change. They don't like the direction the country's been going in. Things haven't been nearly as good as they could be, and now they're going to get better. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.